What should I do about my neighbor hogging the backyard and inviting a man to live in it in a tent? Posted by Educational Passion 63. Holy crap, this is going to be crazy. Here we go. A little background. I'm recently divorced with 2 young children, 4 and 7 years old. I'm 33 at midnight tonight, July 13th. I struggle with mental health issues, mainly depression. I'm on PWD, which is welfare and disability through the government. My mother, 52 years old, had a stroke last year, January 2022, but had recovered fairly well and fast. She started a gradual return to work and then found out she had aggressive metastasized breast cancer and had to start chemo immediately, weekly, to be followed by surgery, radiation, and more chemo. So I had moved in with her upon getting served divorce papers, into her 1-bedroom apartment with my 2 children and her Bernese mountain dog and ragdoll cat. We moved into the upper half of a house with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, blah blah blah. There's a couple that lives downstairs with their yappy butt dog. When we moved in, they had a canopy tent with one side so we can't see in from our large balcony, which is fine. We found out that they smoke the funny all day and night, and I don't care if people smoke the funny, but I just hate the smell. I think it's gross, and my mom has asthma, and it really affects her. So we talked to them, and they moved their tent to the far side of the backyard. We can still smell it and hear them hacking away. Their dog is always running around, so we have to ask them to put him inside so we can let our dog out, because neither of them are fixed, as they're both young dogs and we're all poor. Their dog jumped on my 7-year-old daughter and hurt her, so now both of my kids are afraid of him. We've been here since May the 1st and have probably used the backyard twice because the lady is such a high chatterbox that you end up standing there forever listening to her go on about the most annoying stuff, and then we don't get to play. So we have to ask them to leave so that we can use the backyard, but that seems so rude, so we haven't done it. Then the guy puts up a hammock. And now, today, they've brought this guy in who apparently rode his bike to BC from Alberta, and he's going to be living in our backyard for a few days in a tent. I'm really upset that they didn't talk to us first, and I'm uncomfortable, like I don't know him. I have some strange man now living with us, around my children who play on the balcony. I don't know if I'm overreacting or what, but I'm uncomfortable and upset with them. What should I do? How do I gain access to my backyard while still keeping things amicable? I say do something or take action, OP, because I would want myself and my kid to be safe. Absolutely. My neighbor is a nutcase. Posted by Deep Statistician 83. I've been having issues with my front neighbor since week 1 of moving into my apartment last year. It started when I came back home and there would be brown droppings on the floor, which I thought was dung. Turns out it's his dog vomit, and trash scattered all over the hallway. When I got closer to my door, I noticed there was a bloody pad on my doormat and the trash was coming from my front neighbor. Accidents happen, so I thought it was the wind or some animal knocked it over. That same month, I had a package delivered, and when I came home, I noticed it was ripped open. Immediately after, I installed cameras to see what was really happening. I had another package delivered and caught the front neighbor reaching over and touching the package before looking up and realizing he was being recorded. He proceeded to say out loud, "Man, I didn't even do crap," and went back inside his apartment. Suspicious, right? He has a bad habit of walking his dog without a leash, and it would run off into the woods, chasing whatever animal was out there. When this happens, he yells into the void, waiting for his dog to come back. No recall whatsoever, and mind you, we live by a heavily trafficked road. Turns out, I'm not the only person who has an issue with him. The downstairs neighbors called the cops on him one night due to him and his girlfriend arguing and stomping on the floor. A separate occasion, I noticed brown dropping in the hallway and decided to check the camera to see if an animal had passed through. Come to find out, he opens his door for the dog to vomit out in the hallway and just doesn't clean up after it. This happened on 4 different occasions, and once it was even encouraged to throw up in front of the neighbor's doorstep. So I report this to the front office and included the time where he touched my mail. Shortly after, he comes to my door and tells me to stop lying on him, like I don't have recorded evidence. After this, he'll give me the middle finger or give me the occasional "screw you" through the camera if anything bad happens to him. His car got towed, he flips off the camera. The apartment gave him a trash fine, he yells at the camera and calls me a B. I'm in close contact with the front office, and they tell me about the conditions inside his apartment and how dirty it is. Obviously, this person has no respect for his environment. Recently, I've been vacationing for a couple of weeks, so I can't be bothered to check the cameras. But I came home yesterday and noticed that his bins were splayed all over the hallway. I checked to see what happened, and it turns out the wind blew them down. I wait for him to come home and pick up after himself, but instead he curses at the camera and calls me a weird bee. Part of me thinks it's funny to watch him be miserable, but the other part is worried about his seemingly aggressive behavior. Karen tries to steal my phone, thinking she knows best, posted by the illegal human. I was comfortably sitting on the bus, enjoying a game on my phone. Being considerate, I always keep my phone on silent so I wasn't disturbing anyone. The bus ride was an hour long, which gave me a great opportunity to have some gaming fun. Suddenly, a Karen I didn't know comes up to me, demanding that I give her my phone. It turns out she believed it was her responsibility to teach me a lesson about using phones on public transport. She thought taking my phone was a noble mission. She genuinely thought that she was doing me a favor by taking away my source of entertainment. She believed that losing my phone would be beneficial for me in the long run. I calmly try to reason with her, expressing my confusion and explaining that I wasn't causing any harm. However, it becomes clear that she strongly believes in her righteous mission. She genuinely thinks that taking my phone is her way of imparting wisdom and correcting my behavior. And after a couple minutes of arguing, she didn't. She then yells at the bus driver that I stole her phone. The bus driver gets out of his seat, and he was believing her, so I told her to take my phone, turn it off, and give it to the woman to try to unlock it. She does a random password. It doesn't work. She does a random password again. It doesn't work, and again until the phone locks. I tried telling the bus driver that since she doesn't even know the password to her phone, then it's hers? The bus driver was still a bit skeptical, so when the phone unlocked again, I put in my password and got in on one try. And somehow, she doesn't back down and says, "So what if I tried to take the phone? It's still very disrespectful to use your phone in public. I was just trying to teach this boy a lesson." I spent 40 minutes waiting for the bus because Canadian Transit is a little piece of crap, and when I sit down, I'm trying to relax by playing some games. This Karen tries to steal my phone.
Fired? Are you sure? Okay. Posted by Von Adler. So, my friend's father, since retired, was a mechanical engineer. He was around 55 when this happened and very experienced in his field. In fact, he had some skill sets that were close to unique to the extent that you might be able to replicate them, but at extreme cost. I mean, we're talking multiple people from multiple companies from multiple countries taking weeks, if not months, to get up to speed with specific projects to do the same things. He was also a no BS kind of guy who did his job, did it well, but also pointed out problems and expected others to point out problems to him. He was extremely solution-oriented and had no time for office politics or keeping a positive attitude at work. Basically, your everyday grumpy older engineer who really knew his thing and always ready to help if you asked, but not very forthcoming in team-building exercises and so on. He also ran his own business on the side, doing minor projects and so on. As was required by his employer, he had reported this and was sure to not cause any conflicts of interest, so his employer knew and accepted this. He was considered a valuable employee and got several awards that he cared little for, but anyway, during his many years with this employer. By all accounts, they paid him well, respected his knowledge, and accommodated his style, and he returned the favor by working very hard and making sure to mentor younger and newly employed engineers to make them effective coworkers. Then, his firm was acquired by a larger firm and a new management team installed. Initially, everyone was promised that things would remain the same, but with the new management came a new office culture. The new management pressured for unpaid overtime, for a more American corporate culture with cheering and clapping and so on. He considered it extremely cringe and refused to participate. His status as a long-standing and knowledgeable employee kept him safe for some time before the new management realized that resistance to the new culture centered around him and started pressuring him to play along. When he did not, they turned increasingly hostile, realizing that he held a lot of soft power in the company, having mentored a large percentage of the engineers and resistance to their leadership centering around him. They started ordering him to work overtime, and he answered that he was on time with his projects, and if they had identified an emergency requiring overtime, they would have to bring it up with the union to negotiate the overtime and make sure it was an actual emergency. The contract with the union said no overtime unless in an emergency. They tried to force him to participate in the cheering and the clapping by making it mandatory for him to attend and yelling at him to participate. And he did, but so unenthusiastically that the event turned even more cringe and people started laughing. The workday turned more and more hostile, and he knew that things were coming to a head sooner or later. Being an experienced engineer and knowing how to document things, he already had his ducks in a row. Then it finally happened. They caught him answering an email for his side business on his work laptop. They brought him in and fired him on the spot for theft of company resources. He sat at the conference table and looked the three managers in their eyes, one after the other, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" They all said yes. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" He was escorted to his desk by security to leave his phone, his badge, and his computer at the desk, and then escorted out. Once out of the building, he phoned his union representative, who immediately canceled the firing, claiming there was no just cause, which meant that it would go to the labor board for arbitration. You see, the company had an IT policy that it was okay to use the company laptop for personal business, including a side business, as long as you were on a break and compliant with IT security protocols. And the company was aware of and had approved his side business. And he was on a break. Of course, he had his declaration of a side business, signed by his former manager, and the IT policy available and sent both to the union representative. Then he called his lawyer and asked him to send the pre-prepared cease and desist on 2 patents he held, patents that were not that significant and nothing he could make any serious money out of, since they were mostly for very specific things used by the solutions he designed and used at his employers, but still his, that he had brought with him into the employment and allowed the employer to use in exchange for a slightly higher pay, all duly documented in his contract, of course. Then he went home for some vacation and tending to his side business. He was always a man to prepare and had enough money saved up to last him for a good time, to the extent that he considered retiring entirely. My friend said he had 2 job offers from competitors that had looked to snipe him for some time within the week, basically as soon as they learned he was available. He was gracious, but declined, but offered them to consult with his side business now that he had the time, which they eagerly accepted, at twice the hourly rate he had made at his earlier employers. His colleagues started ringing the day after for advice, since the projects he'd managed could not go on without him. He was perfectly polite, but denied any information and help, saying that he had left everything he had with management and to contact them, as he was no longer employed there. Several clients that phoned his private number were told the same thing. Since his private number was not on a public registry, he suspected that both colleagues and clients spent some time and or money to find it. It took 2 weeks before a manager phoned him and asked things. He politely declined to answer, got yelled at, and replied with something like, "I'm sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who works for you," and hung up. This happened a few times, and the next week HR phoned him and stated that the firing had been a mistake and he was welcome back to his job. He again politely declined, saying that he awaited the labor board's decision, but until then he was happy to consult for them, at 6 times his hourly pay, after taxes and administrative costs, of course. After a few days of wrangling and trying to negotiate, they had to accept, and then he sprung the patent issue on them, forcing them to pay for those too. Less than 2.5 weeks after being fired, he was back at his desk. After roughly 3 months, the firing came to the labor board. The employer stated that they believed they had handled the issue correctly, but were still willing to offer my friend's father his position back, in the interest of goodwill and reconciliation. My friend's father and the union simply stated that he was now employed elsewhere, his own company, and no longer available. The labor board ruled in my friend's father's and the union's favor, and he got the normal damages. 3 months pay damage and 24 months pay severance package, including pension and of course the lawyer cost of the union paid by the employer. According to my friend, her father continued to work there until he retired, working 20 hours or so per week and 10 to 15 hours for other companies, making a pretty penny, continuing to charge them 3 times what he charged their competitors as an arsehole tax. The managers were not fired, but they were moved into their own group apart from the rest of the department when it came to bonus calculations and the cost of the father's consultancy fees and the cost of the labor board arbitration that were budgeted there, meaning they were constantly over budget and thus ineligible for bonuses for several years, which was a decent percentage of the incentives at that company, making at least one of them quit. My friend also said her father usually met any management complaints with a big crap-eating grin and, "What are you going to do? Fire me?" after that.
Karen neighbor destroys my property and then calls the cops on me. I'm innocent. Click the video on your screen so you hear how this ends, and I'll see you there.